It's now time for the Billy C. Show, part of the BillyCBoxing.com network.
And we're coming to you live from the Billy C. Studios in Lake George, New York. I'm Bill Calogero, and it's time for the Billy C. Show. Good morning, good day, good evening, whenever you're watching, whenever you're listening. I hope you're doing okay today. Today's show, well, she's being brought to us by my book, Tom Molyneux, From Bondage, The Baddest Man on the Planet, is available right now where all good books are sold. You can get a copy right now, while you're watching this show, Amazon.com or BarnesandNoble.com. All right. Alex Pierpaoli is going to be joining me here in a couple of minutes. We're one of my favorite, and also one of the listeners' and viewers' favorites over the years, a segment called Blast from the Past. And when we were doing our show daily, we did it at least once a week, and we got a lot of feedback. We covered, all quality fighters from, back in the bare knuckle times all the way up until the 60s and even 80s. But today we're going to talk about one of my favorite fighters of all time, and that's Sonny Liston. Sonny Liston, I mean, this photo of Sonny Liston is one of my favorites. I actually have this photo. It shows the full card table on my wall. And if you look at this photo, I mean, the intention on his face, you could tell he's just a bad intentions kind of a guy. And, he was a mean guy. I mean, there was no question about it. Mean individual. This was a guy that destroyed people in the ring. I have a video here I'll show you real quick. And this one was a fight that he fought against McMurray. This was in 1968. This was when he was coming back after he had lost to Ali, and he was on his way back. And he fought. He fought Whitehurst in 1958. I'm going to show you the McMurray fight a little bit later, but this clip I'm going to show you now is on his rise in 1958. Many say he was in his prime, and he was fighting against Whitehurst. And check this out. This is the kind of power and devastating punching power that this cat had. I mean, even in slow motion, when he connects with him, I mean, you can see Whitehurst just, I mean, he's out, falling behind, falling through the ropes. I loved him. He had a great jab. He had a career record of 50 wins, 4 losses, 39 of his wins coming by knockout. And of his 4 losses, he was stopped 3 times. When he was on his rise, and Alex is going to go through this a little bit later, when he was on his rise, he was one of the most feared fighters in the sport of boxing. As a matter of fact, the late, great Herb Goldman said that when Sonny Liston was in his prime between 1958, and I just showed you that knockout over Whitehurst, and 1963, he was actually the most feared fighter in the professional sport of boxing. It was interesting to see a writer, his name was Gilbert Rogan. He wrote about his style after one of his defining fights, actually. It was over Zora Foley. And he said that Liston wasn't quick with his hand or with his footwork. He relied too much on his ability to take a punch, and that he could be vulnerable to an opponent with more hand speed, but he can be hit, he writes. There's power in both of his hands, even though his fists move with the languor of a monitoring royalty, or as if it's passing through a gaseous envelope, more dense than air. Basically, he's saying he thought he was slow. And it was interesting to see and listen to him write. Now, this was before the Ali fight. Interesting to see that he was predicting that a fighter that could come along with superior hand speed could do some damage. And as we all saw, That was Muhammad Ali. But more importantly, two former power punchers in the heavyweight division, two of the most powerful punchers in the heavyweight division. George Foreman said that when he sparred, because he sparred Liston, he said that Liston's jab was the most formidable he had ever faced. And Sonny Liston was the strongest man he encountered in the ring. He said that Liston had the most natural talent and skill that he had ever seen. And that's from George Foreman, a guy who sparred him. And then with, if you look at Muhammad Ali, the guy who beat him, he was quoted in 1975 when asked about his opinion on Sonny Liston's talents. And this is from Muhammad Ali, the guy that beat him. He said, Liston had a tremendous jab, could punch with either hand, and he was extremely smart in the ring, and he was as strong as any heavyweight I've ever seen. He also said in his autobiography that in his prime, the only two heavyweights who would have caused him serious trouble were Ezra Charles and a young Sonny Liston. Now, it was interesting for him to emphasize that because a lot was made about Sonny Liston's age, which honestly, they say they never really knew. Nobody really knew. He claims he was born on May 8th in 1932. Another founding was that his actual birthday was July 22nd, 1930. The thing was that the town in Arkansas that they were born, they didn't legally have to keep birth records, so there was no record of Sonny Liston anywhere. Rumor had it that when he was born, they carved his name and the date into a tree, and obviously the tree's not there anymore. So it's always been an issue about his age. My man Rick says, was there ever any actual proof that Liston put linoleum on his gloves against Cassius Clay? I don't believe there was, but we're going to have a guest coming on here in a little later. Maybe we can ask him that. So anyway, well, that's a whole nother story. I'm just getting into right now about Sonny Liston. Now, he did fight in the amateurs. A lot of people may not even know that, but he did. It got him out of jail one time, and he fought only 10 amateur fights with a record of 9 wins and 1 loss. And he turned pro to start making some money. His first fight was in 1953, September 2nd, with a first-round stoppage over Don Smith, who actually had a decent record considering it was Sonny Liston's pro debut. He was 3-1 going into this fight when Sonny Liston was making his pro debut. Sonny Liston, the last time ESPN had a list of the hardest punchers or hitters, is what the actual list says. The top 3 were George Foreman, Mike Tyson, and Sonny Liston, and ESPN ranked Liston number 2. And ironically enough, the famed boxing trainer, and I had just recently found out that the gym had closed. Last time I was in Vegas, Johnny Taco's gym was still open. But Johnny Taco, who was a trainer, he worked with George Foreman, with Mike Tyson, and with Sonny Liston. And he was quoted as saying that Sonny Liston was the hardest puncher of those 3. One thing that's interesting about Sonny Liston, was his last fight. His last fight. Now remember, he was on his way back after he had lost. He was 14-0, 14 fights in 3 years, 13 of them coming by knockout, getting his career back on track. And then he suffered a devastating, shocking knockout loss in 1969 at the hands of Leotis Martin. But he would come back again, and he was still a top-ranked fighter. And he fought in 1970 on June 29th. He fought Chuck Wepner in Jersey City. And Chuck Wepner, I don't know if you've seen any photos. I don't have any photos of this particular fight, but that I can post right now, like I did with the videos before. But he took one of the most savage beatings of his career. And later, Chuck Wepner would say that there was no one that realistically could have beaten Sonny Liston during that time. And there's always been talk about the fights with Muhammad Ali, specifically the second one with the Phantom Punch. But a guest that we're going to have on a little bit later wrote a book about it, and it's actually right here. This is the book, and the title of the book is Sonny Liston, The Real Story Behind the Ali and Liston Fights. The author, Paul Gallender, and he'll be joining us a little bit later on the show. And speaking about joining us, right now, I'm joined with my man, Alex Pierpaoli. What's up, Alex?
Good evening, Billy C. How are you?
Oh, I'm doing good. I'm doing good. I warmed up the audience for you.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm sorry. I had to plug in. My computer
So I
was
was showing
almost dead.
before we get into it. I wanted to show my favorite photo. I showed in the beginning of the show. My favorite photo of Sonny Liston, right there. I mean, this photo, I think, says it all about Sonny Liston. What do you think?
That's great. Yeah, that's a really good shot. It's kind of there's a sadness to it, but it's
there's a scariness to it too.
Oh yeah, there.
Yeah. You know, but I was showing some video clips before, but we can get into that in a little bit. But Sonny Liston, a blast from the past. Take it away, Alex Pierpaoli.
All right. Well, so Sonny Liston was born. One of the things Burt Randolph Sugar has said is no one knows the day he was born or the day he died. They kind of ballpark it because
they cut the tree down.
Yeah, and that was part of it, was that he was born. I mean, when a lot of times we use that phrase that this guy came from nothing. Well, Sonny Liston, it is just resoundingly true. He grew up in extremely rural Arkansas, very much very poor, incredibly poor, and his father was a brutal man. He's one of 24 children. One mother, two mom. There was his father had children with two different women. One had 23, the other had 2. So he was one of 25. And like I said, he was born around 1930, although the Ring magazine at one point, maybe this has changed, at one point they ballparked his date of birth as May 8th, 1932.
I talked about that earlier. That's what I think he was telling people.
He told people that? Okay.
Yeah. I think that's what he would tell people. But somewhere that other date in 1930 kind of emerges as the real one. I don't know how, but anyway, go ahead.
Well, and yeah, because like you said, the record keeping was done. They carved his birthday on a tree. That's how rural we're talking about. His dad was a sharecropper. They lived out in the woods. And so, he was not born in a hospital. He was probably, I actually, just having Italian immigrant relatives. I had a grandfather was born on the kitchen table, but
and they made him start making meatballs a minute.
He popped out and his mom started making the macaroni.
I know.
No. But so yeah, they would, I guess, every now and then, once and they would drive to the county seat or get out, take whatever carriage back in those days, I would assume, or walk. They had very little to eat, very little to wear. And that's when they would announce the births. They go to the county seat and report it. So keeping the record would have been putting it on that tree. And at some point, the tree was cut down. So the actual date might have been lost. But his father was a brutal man, just really didn't get a lot of love from his father at all. And he described his own mother as helpless. By the age of 18, he had been convicted of 6 muggings and, had done some time. Really had, reputation as just a brutal person himself. He worked for corporations, for businesses as a union buster. He'd bust up strike. He'd go into picket lines and beat up striking workers on the behest of the companies. Didn't want their employees unionizing. So he brought that into the sweet science, and he in terms of his physical makeup, he seemed like, designed for the ring, in the sense that he was about 6 feet, 6'1". And the thing about him was he had this freakishly long reach. And remember, when they give those reach numbers, they always give it in wingspan. One of the things in the 80s that was kind of cool, and HBO started doing it for a while, Randy Gordon, who was at first he was a boxing commentator, and then he became New York State Athletic Commissioner, used something called Randy's reach, where he would have the fighter extend their jabbing hand, and they'd measure from the shoulder to the knuckles. That would give you a much more accurate number as to how far, his jab could hit, or her jab could be. So when you see those numbers, wingspan is what they're usually recording, but Liston's was 84 inches. Tyson, just to give you an idea, that's a 6'1" man, 84-inch reach. So he had extremely long arms, and his jab he was well known for just this power jab that was more like a pole axe that could just snake out, and, he could hurt you with a jab. And think about it. Tyson Fury, who's 6'9", has an 85-inch wingspan. So that's 1 inch larger, just to give you an idea of the kind of distance he could be from you and still, punch you with that jab.
And not only that, but the amount of power that he had. And just take a look at this for a second. This is him against McMurray, which was a comeback fight after he had lost the title. And when he knocks people out, he knocks them out cold. I mean, watch this knockout here.
And even look at the balance.
And he's not utilizing his reach here. And then this next clip is going to be, this is the second Patterson fight. Oof. And Floyd Patterson, was such a talented fighter. But he's right there. He's right in the wheelhouse there, and he's landing full extension on those punches. Amazing power for a guy. I loved Sonny Liston, but go ahead. I didn't mean to.
No, that's
you're talking about his reach, and
no, absolutely.
And he's known for one of the best jabs. As a matter of fact, I have a photo of him jabbing Ali right behind me. Known for his jab, but I just showed. And before you came on, I showed another clip of his power, and the power was a thudding power, Alex. And like when he landed, that's why I showed those clips. It's like these guys, they're out and they're falling through ropes. I mean, they're not. It's not like wait a minute, was that a knockdown? No. That was a knockdown. All right, the guy doesn't know what day it is.
Yeah, that is, if somebody wants to see a good example of just incredible, just bone crunching power. Watch, it's on YouTube. This is the beauty of YouTube, is a lot of these old fights are they're on there for forever. Well, for as long as YouTube's around, I guess. Yeah. But that Burt Whitehurst fight is just amazing. He absolutely brutalized him, and that would have been a knockout today. It's very strange that it's not a knockout. It just shows you how the fight game has changed. The final,
not a knockout. Here, wait.
Are you going to show a clip of that? Yeah, this is amazing.
This is the Whitehurst.
He knocks him right out of the ring. But he's able
out cold, basically. I mean,
oh yeah. Well, even and before that knockdown,
look, watch this shot. Boom, boom.
Oh,
he's. how could you say that's not a
Well, they
knockout?
didn't. No, they didn't call it a knockout because he actually climbs back and he pulls himself up to a standing position at like the count of 9.5.
Yeah.
And the referee did not wave it off, but that was the final round. So it goes down as a decision victory. But yeah, nowadays they would not have counted. They would not have made him try to get up from that. But
They would have had the ambulance already back to
yeah, and I think they probably should have.
And that fight was in 1958. That was during the rise of Sonny Liston. That was before he became champion. The other clip I showed of Sonny Liston totally, brutalizing poor Floyd Patterson. That was the second time he had already beat him prior to that.
Yeah, and I think
when he won the title.
I think that's the thing, is that if you look at by the time he became champion, his best days were over. I really think that if you look at his prime was probably between 58 and 61. And he doesn't get the shot at Floyd Patterson until 62. And part of that was because people didn't like, even the NAACP didn't want him to get a shot because of his connections to organized crime. It's funny because Floyd Patterson had met with JFK, and Kennedy even asked him, when are you going to fight Sonny Liston? And he made a promise to Kennedy that he would fight him. But Kennedy was kind of like, yeah, maybe you could avoid him because even Kennedy, Kennedy and his brother, they fought a war against organized crime. That could be, depending on whose theory you believe, that could be why they ended up taking him out. But
Customato also,
yeah, because
really
Customato knew what would happen.
Yeah, instrumental in prolonging that fight. But they say from 53 to 50 to 63, those 10 years was the beginning of his career in his prime. But when you look at his record, he did fight on the way up. I see a bunch of fights that he had against really good opposition, especially, contenders in the heavyweight division at that time, and you really start to see it. I mean, you could say the Whitehurst fight, but he was a journeyman and he did what he was supposed to do. But he stepped it up in 1959 when he fought Mike DeJohn, won that fight, and then Cleveland Williams he fights and beats
Twice.
Cleveland Williams.
Stops him both times.
Right. And then back to back. But
yeah,
then a couple
once
of
in 59 and then once in 60.
But then Roy Harris and Zora Foley and Eddie Machin, it was also a huge fight. Machin was good. And the two fights with Patterson and Westfall. I mean, he did fight quality opposition on the rise. And then when he was coming back, he fought some talented fighters as well, which most fighters today, when they make a comeback, one of the fighters admitted it on the big show last week. He says, it was a stay busy fight, which was cool because we all know that, but you never really hear them say that, but Sonny didn't have that easy of a road back to potentially get another shot until he lost, shockingly, I mentioned earlier, to Leotis Martin, which nobody thought that was going to happen. But then he totally practically killed Chuck Wepner in his last pro fight.
Yeah, and Jack Newfield, the journalist, said that was the that was the bloodiest fight he ever saw.
Yeah.
And that, yet, of course, Chuck Wepner's nickname was the Bayon Bleeder. And I think because if you look at 1959 and 1960, just everybody he faced were just the badasses of the day, between Mike DeJohn, Cleveland Williams twice in 2 years, Roy Harris, Zora Foley, Eddie Machin, and with the exception of Machin, he stopped them all. And then Floyd Patterson, I think it would have been interesting if we definitely like bad guys more. And there was a line here. I think.
Hey, let me throw you a curve real quick. Just forget Sonny for a minute. Eddie Machen, if I remember correctly, didn't he have some kind of weird death? Like he fell into a pool with no water, and they claimed that he was pushed. Did you ever read that? Yeah, one of those guys. I'm thinking it was him. There was a book that there was like 10 really strange deaths, and I'm almost sure that that's what happened. He was kind of at a and it was foul play suggested.
Yeah, diving practice in a pool with no water.
That usually doesn't work out too well. But anyway, go ahead.
But this line was from it's from a interview, or actually this must have been like a commemorative article. Yeah, this is just a few days after he died. It's called "Bad Guy of the Ring" by Steve Cady, and it was in the New York Times in January of '71. So yeah, and he died. They placed his death date. His wife found his body on January 5th. And of 71, and they figured he had been dead 5 to 8 days. So they placed his death at like December 30th of 1970. So this article, January 7th, one of the things, this is a quote from Liston. It's called "Bad Guy of the Ring." A boxing match, this is Liston talking, a boxing match is like a cowboy movie, he once said. There's got to be good guys and there's got to be bad guys. That's what people pay for, to see the bad guys get beat. So I'm the bad guy, but I change things. I don't get beat. And I think that's the thing about, especially when you look at the matchup between him and Floyd Patterson. Floyd Patterson, this is America in the 50s and 60s, America's, of course, it's racial history. There's no secret. It's been, complicated to say the least. Patterson is sort of this Boy Scout. He's the sort of acceptable black guy, while Liston is the scary black guy. He's connected to crime, and not just connected. He's a perpetrator of crime.
He was my hero. I love
and I think in those days, it was different than today, where today, especially if you look at somebody, and I think unlike Mike Tyson, and Mike would have those moments, especially when his first incarnation, when he was first coming up.
Wait.
It's like a Oliver Twist type character.
Let's just do that comparison real quick. And by the way, Eddie Machen did fall out of a window. I don't know if he actually fell into a pool, but there was another one that did. But they don't know if it was suicide. He was suffering from mental problems. But anyway,
from falling out of a window, it has its own word. It's called defenestration.
They don't know. They don't know if he jumped out, was pushed out. But wow. The comparison with Tyson and Sonny Liston was made often when Tyson was coming up. And I think in retrospect now, when we get to look back at it, yes, Tyson was a mean guy. He was mean. He went out there and
he's a big softy compared to Liston.
But he was, because we learned that Mike Tyson maybe he wasn't so mean. Like he was mean in the ring, but he had a real vulnerable, weaker side. More human. He kind of taught us all that Mike Tyson wasn't this monster. He was human. He still did a lot of damage in the ring, but he was human. But Sonny Liston, he never got that chance to convince us that he wasn't a mean, vicious man. And you mentioned his youth growing up and the poverty and everything. And he turned to crime. It almost sounds like a necessity. Not that crime ever should. Crime does not pay, but the truth of the matter is he had a real bad relationship with authority. Law, cops, and all of that. And they used to smack him around. I know several stories where they would pick him up, beat the hell out of him, and then dump him in the street. So the reason he hated them, I guess he kind of had a good reason. Not that he wasn't, at fault to to be in trouble to begin with, but it didn't help this guy, and you saw those clips, the way he was punching, a guy today with that extraordinary reach. And we know that he had a good jab, but could you imagine if he was a little more controllable in the ring and a little more refined with, today's technique, where he could utilize that arm reach a little, maybe learn a little footwork and then sprinkle in that power? It'd be tough to beat, Alex.
Oh, I think when you look at how he's ranked by boxing scholars and analysts, if you go to Ibro's all-time rankings, where did I wrote it down? Oh yeah, Ibro's rankings, which they redid them in 2019. He's listed as 8th all-time, so he's certainly given tremendous respect. Personally, when I put in my ballot, I had him 6th. Yeah, I mean, he's tremendous. And I think that was like what I was saying there in terms of, I think he suffered, America was different. The media was very different. And he was not like Mike Tyson was always, with some exceptions, because and in even those times where he was ornery and sullen with the media.
Let me throw an analogy at you. Yeah, I like throwing you curves. All right. How about this? Jack Johnson was the anti, right? I mean, he was shoving his black skin in front of everybody during a time when the country was very, very prejudiced. And then along comes Joe Louis, and they tell Joe Louis, no, you got to be successful. You got to be a good black guy, and he was successful. When Sonny Liston comes along, could it be the same? Could we say that Sonny Liston was the bad black guy and Ali was the good guy?
Well, I think for a little while, yes. But then once Ali, refused to go into the armed services, he was labeled a draft dodger, and at that point, things changed for him. And I think that tells you something about it, because America, and this is not quite as true now, but it's still pretty true. And it very much in sports are seen in a binary way. You're either the good guy or the bad guy, and it's hard to shake that label.
Well, check out.
Well, hold on one second. I think the thing about Mike Tyson is that made him different is he was always not always, but quite often more talkative. Liston was more sullen.
That's what made him scary.
Yes. And I think with Mike Tyson, sometimes it was an act. With Liston, I don't think it was an act. And here this is at one point in that same Steve Cady article, and this is from his wife, Geraldine. He was a nice, thoughtful man, she called him. To others, he was intimidating in presence, a crude-mouthed put-down artist, fast to trump another man's statement with a piece of so-called jailhouse wit. So he could be rough, to say the least. And I think that was the thing is, remember, Mike Tyson, when he started off, his violent history was almost looked at as something cute. He was very much this Oliver Twist figure who had this horrible past and was discovered and adopted by this kindly white man who taught him how to channel that rage into the ring and make millions.
Create that spark, turn that spark to a flame and make it a roaring fire.
Yes, and Liston really didn't have that. There was even a time where Liston beat up a trainer, was seen kicking and stuff.
Well, how about this? How about this photo? Sonny Liston, and who's holding the bag? Joe Louis. What was the relationship there? There's several connections between Joe Louis and Sonny Liston. I made the analogy before, good cop, bad cop, basically. But what's the story with this?
I think that they must have had, I don't know how much of a friendship they had, but I think they definitely had a mutual respect. You definitely saw there's photos available where you see the two of them. And I thought I remember at one point reading somewhere that Liston thought of him as, his favorite heavyweight champion.
Yeah, I think you're right. How about this
I
shot?
think with him and Foreman, that's something that I would. They eventually fought. Yeah, they had fought. I think it's according to Cyber Boxing Zone, 4 exhibitions.
Well, wait a minute. When Foreman was in between Olympics and turning pro, he was sparring Sonny Liston. That was the thing. But check out this photo. Rocky Marciano.
Oh wow!
But look at the look. Does that look like they're ready to fight right there in the hallway? I mean, obviously, these photos are copywritten, but I saw this shot and I said, I got to bring this one up because the look on both of their faces, it looks like they're ready to throw down right now,
Yeah. Well, and that would have been a hell of a fight.
Oh, I know.
I would definitely lean Liston's way. But the thing, and some of those clips you showed, is that Liston, despite his long arms, he could brawl and he could fight in close.
Well, I think my point was, I don't think he was even taking advantage of that reach.
Right.
That's why I was saying before, if he was fighting today, you would have to assume he would be utilizing that, right?
Yeah. Well, and he might not even have to, because I'm not sure that the guys of today could stand up to his power.
They wouldn't even get in the ring with him. What are we talking about?
Yeah, and I think, well, if he was in Saudi Arabia, he could have probably fought all those guys.
So the big thing we started talking. I know I'm forcing you to jump all around, but I like catching you off guard. We were talking about the death, right? So there's been a lot of stuff written about that, and it seems to me that there was definitely shenanigans going on, some interesting points. The Devil and Sonny Liston was a book that I absolutely loved, and some of the points made in that particular book. And we're gonna have Paul Gallender on here in a couple minutes. He wrote the Sonny Liston book, The Real Story Behind the Ali-Liston Fight. So we'll get to ask him the same stuff. But the one couple of points that were made about the death and finding him, and the story that he OD'd and everything. 2 things stuck out to me, Alex. One was that they said, they figured the time of death based on the newspapers that were stacked up outside. Sonny Liston didn't know how to read. He was illiterate. So, I mean, would he still get newspapers to look at the pictures? I don't know. But the other thing is that the guy was deathly afraid of needles. They used to have to put him to sleep to take his blood to test for the fights, and then we're to believe that he OD'd by shooting up, So what's your thoughts on all of the conspiracy theories about the death?
Yeah, it does seem that it's definitely it's unquestionably sad. He died alone. Now this is January 20th, 1971, after the coroner's, report must have done the toxicology. They said that the cause of death is lung congestion brought on by poor oxygen and nutrient blood supply to the heart muscles. Clark County coroner Mark Herman ruled. There had been traces of morphine and codeine were found in the body tissues, but not in sufficient amounts to have caused death. They were consistent with the normal amounts that would normally result from a breakdown of heroin in the body. So yeah, that idea that he had been shooting up heroin and died and OD'd, but it doesn't sound like there was enough that he had OD'd. So maybe he was just not very fit. I don't know. I'd be interested to hear the kind of research that Paul has done about it, because I'm sure he has more.
He was kind of fit because it wasn't long after the Chuck Wepner fight.
Right. Well, but he, I mean, who is that? It's when you're older, and you hear somebody drops dead over 40.
I used to tell you that.
Surprising, It's not too surprising.
The older you get, the guy dies at 90. He had his whole life in front of him.
Right. But I mean, because he had the trouble with the legal trouble not too long before this. He had been arrested for drunk driving. So, I mean, I think that He might not have been in the most tremendous shape. You're right. I mean, he was in the midst of a comeback. And
but why would the so-called mob, if it did exist, why would they want him whacked? I mean,
maybe
what?
he knew something, I don't know.
Well, he made that he was a pawn for them. He was he worked for them. He was part of it. I mean, what
No
yeah.
matter what, it's a very sad death to think, he was all alone in an apartment and then not found for days. This guy is a former heavyweight champion. He came from absolute poverty and made over almost $4 million over his career. Ballpark. Back then, that's a hell of a lot of money. And I think, that if you think about it, those absolute demolitions of Floyd Patterson, he was frightening. And like we had said, it was almost like his coronation came after we had seen the best of him. And then, unfortunately, he happened to run into a young man from Louisville who turns out to be the baddest there ever was. And I think, I don't know, to me, there's a lot of controversy about those two fights. I don't find them controversial. The first one, I think it was definitely legitimate. The second one, I think, was more just a plain, Liston was not in the greatest of shape. He gets put down, flash knockdown from a right hand, and then Jersey Joe Walcott blows it, the referee. Because if you even watch that, Liston gets up and they keep fighting.
I know. Then they wave it off. I know.
Walcott, he finds out from the ringside ref that it's over. He counted 10. Then he goes over and stops it. So if that
the both of those fights, and we're going to really put Paul on the hot seat if he clicks the link correctly. But the truth of the matter is you can make an argument on both those fights. You know how many people, including Chuck Wepner, who fought Ali, said there's no way in hell that he could have beaten Sonny Liston either time. And you say, okay, we know that we've seen these guys with great boxing skill and stuff take out the brawler and bully. But I don't know. But
skills in boxing very often beats will. And even though in the movies you like to think, oh, there's nothing better than will. I think the thing, and personally, this happened when I realized this, and it was a very difficult night, was the night Roy Jones smoked James Toney. I really was rooting hard for James Toney, and he just had never seen anything so fast and so skilled. And whatever else was going on, was tough making the weight, all those things. On that night, it was Roy Jones's night. And I think that was the thing. It can be especially if you're a brutish guy, because remember, Liston dislocates his shoulder from missing. The other thing is that Cassius Clay at that point was not small. He was a big, strong heavyweight, a little bit smaller, a little bit lighter, hell of a lot faster. And he frustrated the living hell out of him. And to me, and not only that, but just the build up to that fight, psychologically, pick every day. He would show up at his house with the bus in the middle of the night and harangue him from the front lawn.
No, hey, listen, it's all part of it. But
I think that first one was legit, and I think that's why Muhammad Ali was just as Mike Tyson has called him. He was like a Tyrannosaurus Rex.
Well, I'll tell you, an expert on this, Mr. Paul Gallender, he wrote a book about it, specifically talking about these two fights, Alex. And we have the luxury of having Mr. Gallender, and he's on our show right now. Can you hear us okay, Paul?
I certainly can. Can you hear me?
Yes. Glad you could join us. I appreciate it. I know it was a long time coming. I know we had tried to get you on sooner, but So tell us about the book. What a great time to come in, because we were just talking about the Ali-Liston fights. What's the story on both of these fights? I think we're having trouble with his connection, Alex.
Yeah, it looks like it.
So,
Buffering.
yeah. Paul, if you can hear me, try and reboot and connect again. Anyway, it was hopefully we can get him back. Yeah, it would be interesting to see. I didn't think that. I look, Ali. You got to give Ali credit for his whole career. I mean, I'm not going to slight him at all. It's just that all the people that seem like they were in the know, right there at that time, on the pulse of boxing, on professional boxing, or in the sport, all kind of say the same thing. They're all shocked. Are they just not giving Ali the credit where credit's due, or what?
I think that kind of thing happens when something that people didn't expect occurs. And I think today, especially now with just this week, where you see what Inoue did. There's
Alex. Let's see. I think we got Paul back. Let's see. Paul, can you hear us now?
You got me?
All right. Good.
Yeah.
So we had asked you to give us a little story on these two fights. Were they legit? What's the story?
The first one was legit. Sonny walked into a trap in that first fight, and he had four things going against him. One was his age, and I'm convinced that Sonny was probably 44 years old at the time of that first fight, which is twice as old as then Cassius Clay. But the main three factors he had going against him is that, first of all, Cassius's previous two fights were against Doug Jones and Henry Cooper, 185-pound heavyweights, both really journeymen, and he looked not good in both of them. So basically nobody, except for a few savvy people, realized that he really had some talent. And nobody in Liston's camp thought that he needed to even train very hard. And he didn't. He trained for a 2 or 3 round fight. Complicating that was the fact that he had an injured left shoulder going into the match. As it turned out, he was undergoing secret physical therapy heat treatments for 2 or 3 weeks prior to the fight. The physical therapist was Barney Felix, who ended up refereeing the fight. The other factor was, like when you were saying in the intro, that Clay went to his home in Denver and woke him up at 12 in the morning, at midnight, and woke up the entire neighborhood. He so angered Sonny that Sonny wanted nothing more than to kill him, and almost maybe even literally kill him. He wanted to do away with him as quickly as he could. And so he fought angry. And every good fighter, whether it be Dempsey or Lewis or even Ali, will tell you, if you fight angry, you don't fight your fight. If you don't fight your fight, you fight the other guy's fight, you're at a disadvantage and you're probably going to lose. And he did. I think just by looking at the fight, you can see that he's not trying to throw it, especially in the 5th round, when that substance got into Clay's eyes. And it wasn't from Liston's gloves. It was from the cut on his cheek or from his shoulder, which was giving him trouble for the entire fight. In fact, Angelo Dundee, when Clay came back to the corner, he could still see. Dundee put his sponge, like he always does, on the forehead and wiped down. Clay had what we call cobra vision, where he kept his eyes open almost all the time, even when he was being punched. So it got into his eyes. Dundee says to Felix, "There's something wrong here. Go check his gloves." He walked over to Liston's corner. He smelled his gloves. He comes back and he says, "No liniment injury." Okay, so in the 5th round, when he's basically blinded somewhat. Liston is snorting like a horse, Clay said, and he's really trying to kill him. He's trying to take him out. If he's trying to throw the fight, he's not doing that. And I know it was written that he and Ash Resnick had won $1 million at 7-1 odds, which is ridiculous for two reasons. One, Sonny never had $150,000 at that point in order to be able to place a bet. And if the mob said they were going to bet $150,000 for him so he would win $1 million, there would be no reason for them to give him. That's not the way the mob operated. I also talked with Ash Resnick's wife and said that she could tell by the look on his face, on Ash Resnick's face, that he lost a lot of money on that. And in fact, Lem Banker, who was a good friend of Sonny's, a good friend of Ash Resnick's, and he was a bookie in Las Vegas, he said that right before the fight, Ash bet $10,000 on Liston. He said Lem wasn't quite so sure that it was a sure thing, so he took $5,000 and laid off the other $5,000. So that's a long way of saying, no, I don't think the first fight was fixed.
Well,
second fight is a different story.
Yeah. Okay. So you don't think the first fight was fixed. So you think Sonny Liston just had enough between his shoulder and being out of shape, stayed on his stool. One of the worst things.
His manager stopped the fight, Billy. His manager stopped the fight because he really could not use his left arm. In fact, when Angelo Dundee, after the fight, walked over to Liston's corner to give his condolences or whatever, as they usually do, he heard Liston saying, "It feels like there's water in my glove." He's wailing. Dundee said he was wailing. Wow. So he was severely injured. 8 commissioned doctors examined him, and the following day they said there was unmistakable evidence of severe damage to his left shoulder that would have prevented him from continuing to the fight. So
it's funny,
he could have gone out there.
It was never. I've never heard it point. I'm hearing the first time how statistically and data backed that was. I've never heard that. I had always heard he was criticized for quitting on the stool.
Well, technically he quit on the stool. He didn't get up and fight for go out for the 7th round, but he didn't quit. His manager, Jack Nyland, stopped the fight.
Right. Now the second
he turned, he waved. He said he can't go on. He broke his shoulder.
Yeah. Hey, listen, it happens all the time today, and nobody cuts him the BS that they've cut him over all these years. But tell us about the second fight. Why do you think that one wasn't real? Well,
the second fight, history would be different right now. You wouldn't be talking to me right now if the originally scheduled match had gone off as planned on Monday, November 16th, 1964. Sonny had trained harder than he had ever trained. He was down to like 208. He was even thinner than he had ever been. Archie Moore saw him train just before the fight, and he says if he's in that condition, he didn't see then Muhammad Ali lasting more than 5 rounds. Howard Cosell said the same thing. He had never seen him train so hard. Sonny, the money was important, but it meant a lot to him to be champion. So what happens? He's ready. He takes a walk with his wife after dinner on Friday, November 13th, 1964. And Sonny was a very superstitious person. And he comes back from the walk, and I can only imagine how hopeful they were that he was going to get his title back and everything was going to be great. And he's greeted by Harold Conrad, the publicist, and his trainer, Willie Reddish. And they say, the fight's been called off. Ali suffered a hernia. He's in the hospital. He's being operated on. And at first, Sonny thought it was one of his tricks. But it wasn't, obviously. And he said, shit. Why did this have to happen after all the hard training was done? And here's an old man. Here's a guy who's, at that point, I'm almost positive he's at least 45 years old. And he had trained like crazy. One of the misconceptions about Sonny Liston is that he didn't train hard. He trained hard for all but 2 fights. The second Patterson fight, because he realized he really didn't have to, and he already had a couple of injuries going into that fight, and then the first Ali fight, the Clay fight. So it's postponed. It's not going to take place for another six months. At the time of the postponement, Ali wasn't in the best shape of his life. He had gone to Europe. He had got the Middle East, where he was honored. I mean, he got the greatest reception any American has.
Yeah, he's breaking up again.
Okay, I'm back now.
Yeah, your connection is going in and out. It looks like we lost you again. Unfortunately. If you can hear me, if you could get back to us, that would be great. Some great stuff going on, Alex, with Paul. And I'll tell you, I told you that this guy was an expert on Sonny Liston. And I honestly, I feel like a jerk because I had never heard that, his corner stopped it. And I'll be honest, I knew that, he had some shoulder issues, but I didn't realize that the injury was so severe.
Yeah, and I think that the other aspect that to me was interesting was how angry he was, and that reminds me of something that I remember Marlon Starlin always saying, that the worst thing that could happen in a boxing match is a fight breaks out, and because you want to be emotionless and just work your strategy. If you're upset and full of emotion, then you're seeing red. And when you're seeing red, you're not functioning right. So that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, let's hope that we got Paul back. How you doing now? There we go.
Okay.
Oh, you got us drooling here. It's like you're doing it on purpose, almost, Paul. But go ahead. I was just telling Alex. I feel stupid because I had never realized the severity of Sonny Liston's injury during that first fight. But so the second fight gets postponed. He has to wait 6 months, and he couldn't get back into the training, or what happened? Like what made him?
No, he trained.
Okay.
Ferdy Pacheco said that you can't train an old body like a young man. And he says, and if you overtrain, you're dead. Well, he was in real good shape just 2 or 3 days prior to the fight. Which had been moved to Lewiston, Maine, because Boston, it was a political move. They made sure the fight couldn't be held. So 20 days before the fight, there was no home for it. And they finally got the home of Lewiston, Maine, which has a history of a fight town. It was a town of 40,000 people. And the fight was held in a hockey rink. All of 2,300 people showed up for the fight. A couple of days before, the fight, 2 members of the Nation of Islam come to Liston's training camp, put a gun to his head and say, "You got to lose this fight, or else we'll kill you." Sonny would not throw a fight if he was threatened. He would be afraid. He would never throw a fight for money. Can you hear me now still?
Yeah, no, I can hear you now.
Okay. So on the morning of the fight, he leaves his suite at the Poland Spring Inn. And shortly after he leaves there, a group of Nation of Islam members, unbeknownst to Muhammad Ali, knock on the door and say, "Hi, Mrs. Liston, we're going to stay with you for a while." So they basically kidnap his wife and his son, who was it was an adopted son who was with them. And they tell Sonny later, we have your wife and your son, and if you don't lose the fight, you won't see them again alive. Now, I know this because I found that out the first time from Ash Resnick's wife, Marilyn, who I interviewed in Las Vegas. And she said she was worried all morning because she was trying to get in touch with Geraldine Liston, and she wasn't picking up her phone. And around noon, she runs across Joe Lewis's wife, Martha Malone Lewis, and tells her, "I'm worried, Martha. I can't get in touch with Geraldine." And Martha says, "Don't you know what happened? The black Muslims have her and the boy, and Sonny's got to lose the fight if he ever wants to see them again." Now, if she would have found that out from Joe Lewis, her husband, if there was one person that Sonny would have confided in, it would have been Joe Lewis. So Marilyn told me that. She would have no reason to lie. And I later got confirmation of that from his sparring partner, Gary Bates, and then a Facebook friend of mine, David DiCarlo, who's from Ohio. He went to a number of International Boxing Hall of Fame weekends. And he would talk to Emil Griffith a lot. Emil Griffith was a good friend of Sonny Liston's. And Emil told him the same thing. And Emil told him that when Sonny told him that when he knew he had to lose the fight, he decided to make it the worst looking fix of all time, which he did, which was an unfortunate decision because it looked so bad that nobody wanted any part of Sonny Liston anymore. His reputation might have survived a little bit, but for the fact that Jersey Joe Walcott could not control Muhammad Ali. And the only person who can conduct a count is the referee. And so there never was a count. And you can see Liston's on the ground. He wants to be counted out, but there's no count. If you remember, he tries to get up, he gets up on one knee, and then as if he has a bout of vertigo, he falls over again, which is really the worst part of that fix. So the fight actually was stopped by Nat Fleischer, who called Jersey Joe Walcott over to the corner and said, "The bum is out. The fight is over. He's been counted out." Well, he hadn't been counted out. And then technically they resumed fighting. Sonny raised his hands. He did not throw a punch. He wanted out of the ring. He wanted to see his family again. And, it's hard for me to have a conversation with anyone who thinks that fight was legitimate. Now, I'm not saying that people who think that fight was legitimate don't know anything about boxing, but they know nothing about Charles Sonny Liston. Have you ever watched the fights between Cleveland Williams and Sonny Liston?
Yeah. We were showing some clips before, not those, but just showing the talent and the power that this man had.
He took some shots from Cleveland Williams, who back in 1959 and 1960 was in his prime. If the Cleveland Williams of 1959 had fought the Muhammad Ali of 1966, that would have been a good fight. I'm not saying Cleveland Williams would have won, but he would have had a good chance of winning that fight because, like Sonny said, he punched hard and he punched fast. And he hit Sonny with some shots that didn't even buckle Sonny's knees. And if he could take Cleveland Williams' best shots, you're trying to tell me that an off-balance 6-inch right-hand punch is going to knock down arguably the toughest man ever to enter a ring? It's preposterous. Anyone who maintains
the way he rolls around, it does look like he's acting.
He wants to be counted out. That was the plan.
So let me ask you this, Paul. After that. And you made a point before. You said, nobody wants any part of him, but he bucked the odds and he started a comeback that was successful after that fight. And up until he had gotten stopped by Leotis Martin, which was kind of a shocking fight. He was dominating, and then he came back with practically destroying Chuck Wepner. I mean, it looked, for all intent and purposes, that he was heading back in the right direction.
Well, yeah. He didn't fight anywhere for a little over a year after the fight in Lewiston. And then he could only get fights in Sweden. He fought 4 times, and he knocked out 4 guys. It wasn't until the summer of '68 that he got licensed in California, and I think Nevada, that he was able to fight in the United States. And I think it was in July of 1968, he beat really severely a rated heavyweight by the name of Henry Clark. He won every round. Clark didn't come out for the 8th round. And it was kind of unfortunate that there was that heavyweight elimination tournament that they held after they had stripped Muhammad Ali of his title, unfairly, of course. And Sonny was head and shoulders better than any of the 8 fighters in there. I mean, one of the fighters was Floyd Patterson, and Floyd Patterson almost won the whole tournament. Well, we already know, what he did against Sonny Liston. I mean, he never saw 2 minutes and 11 seconds of either fight in the first round. The thing about the Leotis Martin fight, and I remember watching that, and I felt so bad for Sonny Liston because it was a shock. But he took that fight on 2 weeks' notice. He was in Arizona filming a spot for on Love American Style, I believe. And George Foreman said he had a cold that he couldn't shake. And Len Banker told me the same thing. And Sonny would not train between fights. He would always walk. But until he had a fight, he wouldn't go into the gym. So he had 2 weeks to train. He goes into the ring with still a fairly severe cold. And he's winning the fight through 7 rounds. But he can't breathe through his nose anymore, so he spits out his mouthpiece. And then he gets caught with the right hand and then a left right, and he goes down. And that's what a real knockdown and a real knockout looks like, not what happened in Lewiston, Maine. Yes, then he fought Chuck Wepner. Chuck Wepner took the beating of his life. Chuck Wepner said he's fought a lot of people. He fought Foreman, he fought Ali, he fought some big hitters. He said, nobody hit me the way that Sonny Liston did. And Sonny at that point is probably 51 years old. Wow. So he still had his punch. At that point, could he have beaten Joe Frazier? In 1970, I don't know. The youth usually prevails. If they had fought in 1968, I think Frazier would have had a chance. But Sonny with that 68-inch reach and that jab, that 84-inch reach and that jab, I mean, he could control his fights with it. And he always did. He said, I jab to hurt. That's all. He said, I fight my fight. I always fight my fight.
Hey, Paul, we're running out of time, but I got to ask you, so what's your thoughts on Sonny Liston's death? There's so many things swirl around it. I mean, was it drug related? What happened in your opinion?
I know exactly what happened. This is my book. I just published last year a second edition of it, Sonny Liston, the real story behind the Ali-Liston fights. And I solved
Is that different that that's the same one, right?
Yeah, is that a hardcover or a paperback?
This is a hard copy.
Oh, okay. The paperback, which is sale now, and it's got updates, especially on how Sonny died. I know how.
You got to send me a copy of that. That's okay. Go ahead, tell me how.
Yeah. Sonny's wife and adopted child Danielle flew to St. Louis for the holidays. I believe Geraldine's father was not well, and Sonny and Geraldine weren't getting along that well. Sonny was kind of out of control at that point. He was doing whatever he could to make a living, and fights are hard to come by. Johnny Tocco, his good friend and trainer, he knew him back in St. Louis in the early 50s. He invites Sonny to his New Year's Eve party, and Sonny says he'll be there. Geraldine is calling Sonny and hasn't heard from him since like the 28th of December. So Johnny Tocco calls Sonny at midnight because he hasn't come to his New Year's Eve party. And then he calls him again at 2:00 in the morning, and there's no answer on the phone. Following morning, Geraldine calls Tocco and says, I'm worried. I haven't heard from Sonny in days. Johnny Tocco goes over to his house. The door's locked. His car is in the driveway there, and he can't get in. But he's worried, so he calls people he knows. I'm not sure if it's the police department or the sheriff's department. They gain entry to the house. The living room area is in total disarray. There's been an epic fight there, evidently. They found Sonny with a needle sticking out of his arm and the house in disarray. Johnny is upset and he leaves. The day before, Sonny's housekeeper, who also was a housekeeper for Lem Banker, had on New Year's Eve day had gone over to clean the house, and she had a key. She opened the door. The smell, well, there was no smell yet, but she saw Sonny, who was dead. She called Lem and told him what happened. He said, just leave, lock the door, don't do anything. So nobody called the police. Johnny Tocco leaves, and there's no word of his death until Geraldine gets home on the night of January the 5th, which is a good week after Sonny was murdered. She calls a number of people, doesn't call the police yet because I mean,
Paul, I got to interrupt you for a second. I just want to make sure I'm following this. Are you saying that his body was discovered prior to it being announced that he was dead? Did we just?
It froze.
Oh gosh,
These cliffhangers.
It's cliffhangers, right? Oh, Paul,
Oh, there he is. There we go.
Okay.
All right. Did you hear the? It's like this is like a whodunit show we got going on. Every time I try to get an answer, we freeze up here. But
I know.
Are you saying? Are you saying that? Yeah. Are you saying? Yeah. It's adding to the mystique. Are you saying that his body was discovered prior to the announcement of his death?
Yes. Lem Baker told me that Marilyn Stevenson. I'm not sure if I forget her last name, but his housekeeper opened the door, saw his dead body with a needle sticking in his arm, called Lem, and Lem told her to leave. The following day, at the request of Geraldine Liston, Johnny Tocco goes over there, can't get in, calls the police, and sees the house in disarray, and Sonny is dead. When Geraldine gets home, the house is perfectly in order. It stinks like hell. And Sonny's in his bedroom propped up on this bench, and there's no needle in his arm. And his body is badly decomposed. It's been decomposing for almost a week.
Wait a minute. What did the police do when they were there? They closed the door?
Well, I think what happened is the sheriff at the time, I forget his name offhand, he was a real tough guy. He was a real tough man. Nobody fucked with that sheriff. And he called the mob, and I'll tell you how I know why it was the mob in a second. And he said, look, you can't, if you're going to kill somebody, if you want, we don't want to have to investigate this murder. You need to clean up this house because otherwise it's going to be a big investigation.
Wow.
So between January 1st and January 5th, they cleaned up the house. Now, I know it was a murder because a man in 2015, I think, the son of a mobster, published a book where he said his father, who he had been estranged from for 30 years, about a year before he died, they reconnected, and he told him he was there the night that they killed Sonny Liston. And he said there were 6 or 7 of them there. And evidently what happened, I think the day before the fight, or before the day he died, or the day before he died, a man delivered some heroin at Sonny's request to his house for the 2 white junkie women who were with him, and because he was with those women a lot. And I think one of them betrayed Sonny, maybe left the door open. And Sonny put up the fight of his life and finally succumbed. And once they had him succumbed, they injected him with an overdose of heroin. As Johnny Tocco said, he'd probably give him enough heroin to kill 5 people. Wow. I have since learned from some sources in Nevada that it was probably in retribution. his murder was probably in retribution for Sonny not throwing the Wepner fight 6 months earlier, 6 months to the day, actually. And because they thought they had a deal. They were going to give Sonny $7,000, which was in addition to the $13,000 purse that he was getting to fight Chuck Wepner. The mob was grooming Wepner, and they had a big fight scheduled for him in Madison Square Garden, but it was based on him beating a named fighter like Sonny Liston. Like I say, Sonny Liston would never throw a fight for money, but they thought he was going to throw it. I forget the name of the mobster. He comes in the dressing room after the fight with a couple of his henchmen, and he throws an envelope with $7,000 at Sonny's chest, and it falls to the ground, and they say, "Look, N-word. If we ever see you again, you're a dead man." Sonny was so scared that he left the dressing room basically in his robe, and he left behind his boxing shoes and his cup, which are the two things that a boxer keeps with him for his entire life. You know, if they work, there's no reason to change them. And so it's fairly common knowledge amongst people in New Jersey, although they don't talk about it except amongst themselves, that's how and why Sonny Liston died. And I believe that was the case. Now, the thing about Sonny Liston, his whole life is a damn mystery, Billy. When was he born? How old was he? What happened in the first Ali fight? What happened in the second Ali fight? And what happened when he died? What I find is really tragic is the two things about him that most people want to know is, one, what happened when he died? Did he commit suicide? Was he a junkie? Was he killed? And what happened, in the second in the Ali rematch? They asked the question, but nobody wants to know the answer. It's what's going on is that, Ali fans, and I was a big Ali fan. I was a huge Ali fan. He's the guy who got me interested in boxing from the time he won the Olympics in 1960 until 1978 when he lost to Spinks. And I go, come on, please retire. And that's when I took it upon myself. I just had an epiphany that, Jesus, Sonny Liston, because I started doing some reading. Apart from Muhammad Ali, I didn't think there was any fighter then, and I don't think that there's been any fighter since, who at his best had a reasonable chance of beating him other than Muhammad Ali. So, he's unfairly maligned. People misunderstand the guy. Was he a saint? No. But if you met the man, you would have liked him. And if he knew you, he would have done anything for you. And so, what I've tried to do is set the record straight about Sonny Liston. He wasn't a bad guy. And there's no shame in losing to Muhammad Ali. But he did not get knocked out. And anyone who thinks that, please don't try and have a conversation with me. Right. I mean, to maintain that Sonny Liston was knocked down or out by that 6-inch punch by Muhammad Ali in Lewiston, Maine is tantamount to claiming that if Abraham Lincoln were alive today, he'd still be a Republican. In other words, it could not happen. It could not happen. Man, I mean, he fell down. It looks like he's giving a demonstration out.
Yeah.
No, I know it was bad. But Paul, did I lose you again? Well, yeah. I don't know if you can hear me, but I wanted to thank you for coming on and enlightening us with some of this stuff, because you've definitely taught me some things today and
changed my mind.
And I hope you are hearing me, because I'd like to get you back on the show, and we'll get you a much better connection. I don't know what you're connecting with, but hopefully we'll get him something better. But Paul Gallender, get his book. I got the hard copy of his book right here, and he just said he released a paperback version. It's called Sonny Liston, The Real Story Behind Ali and Liston Fights. Paul Gallender, great interview there, Alex.
Absolutely tremendous. And from what he said, it sounds like he was good friends with Joe Louis, because if their wives were,
that was the last thing I wanted to ask him. I wanted to ask him, hey, because I never realized that, and then I was going to slip in the question. Well, we all know that Joe Louis had a heroin problem too towards the end. Could that have been, could Sonny have done it? I mean, he said that he had gotten some for the floozies he was
Yeah,
hanging.
it sounds like he had a woman problem, but maybe not a problem. It's just like
that
he
was
wanted to
was
keep
the
them
case.
happy.
That was
He
the
was
case.
enjoying the holidays on his own with his
That-
wife and kid were away.
Yeah, no, that was the case. But anyway, Alex,
That's and that is awful to think that that history. I don't know, because even myself, I had no idea about that his wife and kids were being threatened. But that
I
makes,
did not.
makes a
I
hell of a
didn't know
lot of
that.
sense.
That's
I
out of a
definitely got to
movie.
read this book.
Yeah, no, I it's good. Oh, I got to read. I want to hear that. I've always been interested in the death of Sonny Liston because of all the different rumors. But
Well, and it makes sense, because if you watch, it does almost look like a
oh wait,
pantomime.
it looks like I got Paul again.
Oh.
We'll see if we can get him on.
Because it does, almost the way he's rolling around on the ground from that the anchor punch, it does look like he's pantomiming.
Paul, can you hear
That
us?
makes a hell of a lot of sense to me.
You there, Paul? Paul, can you hear me? All right. Like I said, if you can hear me, we appreciate you coming on. I'm going to reach out to you. We'll get you back on. We'll figure out what this connection problem is. It sounds like it might be his connection speed, but anyway, Alex, I appreciate you coming on, and
Thanks a lot,
you know,
Billy.
yeah, I hope that you can join us again. I know your schedule's tight, but for everybody out there, make sure you subscribe to this channel. Don't forget the podcast. We will be back Thursday, January 4th, the kickoff 2024, our 21st year, 5:30 p.m. Eastern time. Be there. Until then, ciao, baby.